noise coming from that creature.
Welcome, everybody, to the 11th episode of the Bizarre Base broadcast. Tonight I'm here with Andy McGrath of Beast of Britain. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm very, very happy to be here, actually. Been excited about it all week, which shows you the kind of life that I have. But no, I'm very, very happy to be here.
No, it's great. It's really an honor to be able to talk to you. So, do you want to start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm British, as some people might have detected at this point, but the strange accent. Yes, so I've been into cryptozoology for it's about 28 years now, actually, and almost 29 years, and I just always loved everything about it. Everything from Nessie sightings to the Patterson Gimlin sighting, and people of my age, sort of mid-40s, the program they used to be on, and Arthur C. Clarke's program too. Everything was mystery and strange and unknown animals. And so I was just a collector of sightings. I've been a musician most of my life. I was a touring musician, not unlike Lyle Blackburn, but not as good. And I've worked, my whole life as well. And when I was 40 years old in 2016, I'd been working 50 hours a week with a 3-hour commute, 5-6 days a week in London, central London.
Oh, wow.
And my wife said to me, we decided we're going to sort of take time out to our own projects so we'd save some money up. And she said, well, how about this monsters thing that you really like? And I was like, yeah, I guess I could kind of do a blog or something. And first of all, I said, no, I'll make it a TV series. I know somebody who's made a few TV bits, and I'll just write a series and tell him about it. And she was like, yeah, great. And of course, I was like such a anybody who knew anything about television wouldn't have attempted that in the first instance. And he actually said to me, well, I don't think this is really ready, but why don't you write a book? Because at least then when you try to sell your idea as a series, it'll be protected.
Right.
So I started doing that, and I had this ongoing challenge with another friend at the time to prove there was more cryptids than just Nessie in the UK.
Right.
And I started writing blogs and telling people I was going to write this book, Beast of Britain. And actually, I think I started interviewing on podcasts by about month 2. And I released blogs and I did podcasts all the way through writing the book. It was always coming. So like this piece of North America at the moment, Beast of Britain was always coming. And eventually in 2017, I released it, and it went okay. People seemed to like it, and more of your countrymen seem to be more interested in listening to me talk about it than my own.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's you're always more attractive outside of your own house, aren't you, I guess? And,
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and if you came here, everybody would be like, oh, he has such a great accent. Talk American for me. Then the same thing happens in reverse.
Right.
And, and it just kind of, not blew up, because it's never blown up, but it got traction. And
right.
It's 2020. Here I am in the middle, towards the end now, with a few rewrites of the second book, Beast of North America, and still trying to sell the series.
Right.
Yeah, and that's it. And talking to lovely people like yourself about all the wonders and horrors of the cryptozoology world.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely the good and the bad in this field.
Yeah. Sure.
So yeah, no, that's all really very interesting. Are there any particular cryptids just worldwide in general that interest you more than others?
I mean, I've always been a lake monster guy right from the very beginning. That's always been my thing, and I came to Bigfoot a lot later, really. And I know those are the two sort of rock stars of cryptozoology,
right?
Those two guys. Maybe Mothman a bit more and things like that now, Dogman. But I always loved that so much. I've been to Loch Ness a bunch of times and a bunch of the other lochs and lakes in this country. I've also been to Lake Champlain. When I was there in 2018, night, I popped down to Lake Champlain for a few days to do a bit of champ hunting, which was cool.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that fascinates me. Just, I suppose, if you're out looking in the woods, and of course the woods in the US are very different to the woods here in the UK, but generally when you're in the wilderness, it seems kind of finite, and when you don't find anything, you can sort of convince yourself that there is nothing there to find. But with a big, deep body of water, you could look at those things for years and still believe you're in with a chance. It's
right,
a strange, addictive type of experience. At the beginning, it's kind of boring, like watching paint dry, but and the movement of the water really starts to mess with your eyes, because of course, these constant ripples when you're staring at them tend to affect your vision. They do mine anyway. But after a couple of days, when you've gotten into your groove and you've got your flask and decent sandwiches, knowing you're not coming in
right.
To the house for another 8 hours, it kind of gets kind of peaceful and nice, and you can sort of believe that something could be down there, just waiting for you to bugger off so they can come out and have a bit of a sun up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, lake monsters first and foremost, but when I start looking into the book here, Piece of Britain, for example, in the UK there's so many lake and sea monster reports in the UK. It's really amazing, and Loch Ness is just one of many. Just one of many.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to other lakes, Lake Bala in North Wales, which has a smaller version of Nessie called Teggy.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, Teggy you might have heard of. Bonessie in Lake Windermere, and many of the other lakes there in the Lake District, as they call it in Cumbria in the north of England.
Oh, yeah.
Just before Scotland, has also a whole range of different beasties around the area.
Mm-hmm.
Morgar, which you must know about in Cornwall.
Right, yes.
Yeah, a very famous one, possibly, hoaxed, but a lot of the sightings seem very genuine, and this just goes on, and of course, Tamsin, our very own River Thames monster, which was filmed, or something was filmed.
Right, yeah.
3 times in 2016. That one actually is what started to hook me back in to wanting to do this seriously, because it was at that time when I started to want to do a different project, and between the first sighting and the second sighting and third sighting, I was actually out on the water looking for it after the first sighting was published.
Mm-hmm.
So that happened, and then within that same week I was out on boats, every day trying to find something, and then the second sighting was filmed, and they wasn't there. Then the third sighting was filmed, and I wasn't there. I was like, oh God, come on! I'm literally here, and I'm the only guy that's interested in London in seeing you. You've got to make an appearance, and it never happened.
Yeah.
Those things don't happen, do they? When you want to see them, just some random somewhere with a camera.
Yeah. Have you ever had any experiences, cryptid-related experiences?
I haven't, and really, I've contemplated this for a long time now. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? There's so many witness researchers in the crypto world,
right?
Cryptid world, and I've come to the conclusion that for what I've been trying to achieve, it's better that I haven't seen anything, because essentially it's kind of it's like qualifying yourself.
Right.
Instead of saying, well, I would like to be worthy of the role and I'm willing to work up to it, you're kind of saying, well, I've seen one, so I know they're real, so the mystery's over. I'm just out there to show you that it's real, so just take my word for it, let's get going.
Right.
Yeah. So yes, I'm kind of glad I haven't, but I would like to, get some feedback from our cryptid friends at some point.
Totally.
In the near future, if possible, please.
Yeah, there's some, some people are, when it's investigators reporting a sighting, I've noticed people tend to be sort of more skeptical about that, because you're out looking for some sort of cryptid creature, right? And then you find evidence of it, and then people kind of raise an eyebrow, like, well, you were looking for it, so it could be you sort of just,
confirmation bias.
Right, yes, that's what I was trying to think of.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange thing. I did a clip with a friend of mine. He's just been in touch with me tonight, actually, Trevor Cornwall. And about 2 years back, we were out in some area in Surrey, which is kind of the area that I live in here outside of London, just on the border of London.
Oh, yes.
We're talking about the perils of being todd standing. So we were joking to each other. Always joke with people when I go out with them, and we've got cameras. For God's sake, let's hope we don't find anything, because our careers will be over. And
right.
Because essentially, once you qualify, we want to find something clearly, but that's a joke. Once you qualify it with evidence, it's disputable. I've said for years and years that I prefer to have sightings than photographic and film evidence. Like, personally, for me, obviously I want to see evidence, but personally I prefer it because it makes it easier to report on. Because once you get, you just have to evaluate the individual, but once you get the photo in front of you with a bit of film, you're like, well...
Right, yeah.
Maybe it was something like a cat.
Right.
Up a tree and not a dog bed. I mean, yeah.
Right, yeah.
It kind of it gets rid of the magic, so to speak.
Okay, yeah. So what is sort of talked about the some of the lake monsters over there. What are some of the other creatures, I guess, from the UK?
Well, this whole British Bigfoot phenomenon,
right,
which very, very controversial. And I think really when I first started having my confrontations with people here, is because I'd sort of given it an ear and said, okay, let's have a look at this. Basically, that if there is something here. I spoke to a lot of witnesses. I was in touch with a lady called Deborah Hatswell, who was a witness researcher who created a map, and she gave me access to a lot of sightings, and I thought, wow, this is very interesting. There were certainly some very, very compelling tales, a lot of descriptions, as in, large hairy man or upright chimpanzee or a gorilla on two legs that didn't seem to have Bigfoot on the brain. And that's not something that would be very well known amongst the average British person on the street.
Okay, yeah.
They wouldn't really know to say Bigfoot, and so I like those things. Okay, like a chimpanzee that was very tall with a man-like face, but it seemed like an ape, and it was just amazing to me that this could be a thing. And I think the best sighting I received was from an ex-primate keeper, 37 years, and
oh wow,
maybe I'd been speaking about this before. He was a primate keeper at Twycross Zoo, which is a very famous zoo here, and he'd been retired. He'd actually nearly been beaten to death by a chimp. And he'd been retired, so he took a real beating one day. He was a herpetologist as well, I think, as well as a primate keeper. Anyway, a very knowledgeable guy, not a big guy, 5'2", something like that. And he used to go up to Scotland, to Strathspey Forest, camping with his brother. And Strathspey Forest is actually part of the old Caledonian forest that used to cover the top of the country.
Oh, okay.
Very old forest. And they were hunting rabbits one morning. This is just wild camping, they call it. They used to go out, and I think you guys would just call it camping or
right, yeah.
Wild camping, no toilet block, no
right, yeah,
no campsite. And so they were out hunting rabbits one morning, small arms, because you can't really have guns here. Right. And about 50 feet away, in this rabbit field they sort of sketched out the night before, he saw a large black-haired creature sort of bent. It seemed like it was bent over a blackberry bush. And he remember thinking, what on earth is this thing? And as he heard them, it kind of turned its head to the side, stood up and turned around and looked at them. It was about 7 feet tall.
Wow.
And he described it from his experience as a primate keeper. He said it was kind of built like a gorilla, but in the shape of a man.
Okay.
And so it was very big, very well built, but the face, he said, was like an older bonobo chimp, balding on top.
Right.
Almost no muzzle, almost completely flat. Which is something that's always piqued my interest about Bigfoot reports of this flat face. Is the flat face or the lack of a muzzle, is that what gives the man-like appearance?
Right.
Absolutely. Anyway, so he saw this. It made eye contact with them. It looked at them for several seconds, I think, like a lifetime, So
Right, yeah.
He was terrified, and then it turned and walked away into the forest. And he was shocked. Oh my God, what have I just seen? This is something outside of my experience. He turned around. He said to his brother, "Oh my God, what was that?" His brother was gone. He'd fled.
Yeah.
When the creature clearly stood up, and I guess blood isn't really thicker than water. And he'd gone. And by the time this witness got back to the campsite, it was all packed up, and his brother was in the car for them, ready to go. And I guess you wouldn't be really have experience like that. This isn't the woods you're camping in. Off you go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing to him though. He became really, really into the genre. He became a convert, I guess, as some of the other primates.
Yeah.
He was convinced that what he had seen was an unknown form of primate, not a caveman, not a Neanderthal, not a cross between man and ape, but an ape, just one he'd never seen before.
Okay.
Interesting. So these are some of the things that the stories that abound. You have to be skeptical that you are yourself. You have to think, is there something behind it? What's the intention? How could something like this be in Britain? It's an island after all, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Although we used to have bears and wolves and things, and they got here somehow too, I'm guessing. Yes. So very interesting. So that's one of them. Anyway.
Right. Do you have any theories about the British Bigfoot phenomenon or anything like that?
I do. Several. So.
Yeah, you could talk about whichever, but.
Yeah, no, fine. I mean, one of my main theories about if it's a reality is that they could have entered the country thousands of years ago through the Doggerland Bridge.
Right.
Yes. Okay, so the Doggerland Bridge, basically from ancient times, it was land that stretched between Britain and continental Europe. It was discovered in the 20th century, and when our fishing trawlers began to drag up the remains of deers and mammoths and lions and prehistoric tools and weapons. And it's just east of an area called the Wash. It's in the English Channel. It's all speculation really, but the archaeologists, they believed the Doggerlanders, they were hunter-gatherers, and they migrated with the seasons, and the landmass was probably submerged 6,500 BC. Now, I don't even know how they know that. I think it's a guess.
Right.
They're all guesses. But there was once a land bridge between us and Europe, and that would make sense. The sea surrounding the British Isles is very shallow. I mean, in terms of what a sea would be. Right. So perhaps they entered that way. We've got lots of legends of the wild man or the wood woes or the green man.
Yes.
Properly. You might be familiar with all of our old noble heraldry and coats of arms and carvings and sculptures and murals in churches, especially, but also noble herald featured these hairy wild men, these wood woes. Woodwars, I think it is in the German. So it features all throughout Europe. Mm-hmm. Yes, they could be very mythical creatures, but some of the carvings you get, especially in some of the cathedrals, have conical heads. Very, very ape-like. Very interesting. At a time when actually we wouldn't be aware of apes. Some of these go back to the 12th century.
Right, yeah.
So there seems to be something there, but it's really hard to separate folklore and in fact, just because there's dragon folklore, it doesn't really mean there was dragons.
Right.
Perhaps they based them on something.
Right.
As some people might think, like dinosaurs that were relics and survivors.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps they just got lucky. We don't know. But it does seem to be a bit of a coincidence with woodwoes and our modern day Bigfoot reports, and that they have some corroboration at least.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned the conical heads and stuff like that, because in America, in the earlier days of when Sasquatch is really starting to make headlines, was sort of in the earlier 1800s, when people would have sightings, they would describe it as a wild man, and then when word of the gorilla started spreading and things like that, they started to take on a more ape-like appearance, and now they've sort of, you know, mixed into a half man, half gorilla sort of description in more modern times. At least that's just something that I've noticed.
You know what? I mean, what you're saying actually, I think it really plays into another one of my points of interest, with you, which is the psychology behind how people interpret what they see, but also, especially for chaps like us, why we would be into what we're into,
right?
And how that affects us. One of the ideas I've had for a long time is that when people are describing things like the primate keeper, for example, he may have been the best placed witness to judge whether this was an ape or a cross between man and ape, or he could have been actually susceptible to his experience, in that he could only use what was in his mental library to describe what he saw. And we all do that. So if you ever see some of these old lake monster or water horse depictions, you know, it has like it has wings instead of flippers. It has like the head of a fox with a big long neck with a weird fish tail, and we don't really think that they look like that, but you know, whoever's describing it to the artist is pulling at the best aspects of what he can see around him or she can see around her to describe this animal. So it's you know, based upon the available data in the mental library. And the example I always make is when the Aztecs or Moctezuma saw Cortez's ships arriving. They thought they were floating mountains.
Right.
But they don't look like floating mountains, but that was their best guess as to what they were looking at. Yeah. And so there's this aspect in cryptozoology a lot, and then the theories that attach to it, which then, for me, play into another aspect of psychology, which is in our modern Western culture, especially places like UK and the US, is the absence of corporate religion in society, and this weird God-shaped hole, you know, for whether it's religious or instinctive, that we try to fill and then project onto the things that we want to believe in. So, you know, the paranormal Sasquatch, the UFOs Sasquatch, the flesh and blood Sasquatch, etc. And within it, you can normally see the whole philosophy, you know, of the person.
Totally. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So that's, unfortunately, I get really stuck in these things. That's been far more intriguing to me the last 2 years than anything else, any sighting.
Right.
It's just seeing how people react to it, especially how they get angry when it's challenged. The kind of anger that they may have because when you insult somebody's beliefs, you're questioning their core, right? Their view of the world, and that's something most people can't react to in a positive way. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point, actually, because it's not a lot of people honestly look into, you know, the psychological possibilities and things like that. People really sort of, even if you're skeptical about cryptids and things like that, they still look at it as a sort of, from a very like physical, you know, what if this person did see something. No one ever really looks at it from a psychological standpoint of people like projecting what they believe in. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to a point anyway. You know, at a certain point, people have to be believed. I always say, people, I've been mistaken for somebody who doesn't believe witnesses. I believe them no matter what.
Right.
Whether or not I report their sighting might be to do with whether I think it's plausible enough to report. I've always used to say that I ask everybody who I interview who's got a sighting, I said, do you have a mental health issue?
Right.
But I'm really quick to point out to them that doesn't exclude them from having a sighting or their sighting being valid. I just need to know whether the mental health issue, whether the sighting falls outside of the norm of your mental health issues. So if you have hallucinations, is this something out of the ordinary for your hallucinations?
Right, absolutely.
Or is it very irregular? Because if it's out of the ordinary, maybe something extraordinary still happened.
Yes.
Yeah. Although that's, you know, more complicated.
Right.
Well, look, I mean, in the work that you guys are doing, it's very interesting to me. And, you know, I like strangely, as a religious person, I like the scientific approach.
Right.
One would think I wouldn't, but I do very much appreciate it. And it's because therein, whether it's scientific for investigating things that are supernatural or paranormal, out of this world, or flesh and blood, you can still do it scientifically. And with the Association of Cryptozoological Research, it's great because you get that, you get that every day. So strangely, you said you've been following my work. I've been following you guys for a while too, and just saying, "Wow, okay, that's a really good idea. Yes, I'll definitely quietly pinch that and use it in my next investigation."
Right. No, I think that's great. I interviewed. I don't know if you're aware or if you're familiar with the show Monster Quest over here. I interviewed Doug Hychek, the creator.
I heard that.
Yeah, and he said something that really stuck with me was that, people in the field who are investigating need to not give up when their first thing that they try doesn't work. You need to keep, even just like thinking outside the box, but also trying the same thing over and over again. Because just because one technique didn't work one time, that doesn't mean it won't work, 5 or 6 or 10 times after that.
Yeah. Well, there could be a feeling, I think, in this genre in particular, and also in the paranormal and UFO genre,
Right.
of predestination. Have you ever heard of that?
Okay, yeah.
It's a Christian concept, yeah. So, but predestination for being successful in the search for cryptids. You love Bigfoot so much that you were going to have an experience. Like Andy's been going to all these lakes and logs for years and years and years his whole life. He loves
Right.
Nessie and all these things so much, desperately want a sighting. It doesn't happen. I'm like, well, hang on a second. What about my heart's really into this. Never mind random Australian tourists who went to Loch Ness and had a full sighting.
Right.
I'm a season ticket holder.
Right.
Surely I pay my dues, and it doesn't happen. And it's not because of the technique, as you say. Oftentimes, it's just that we don't have jukebox cryptids. They're not on a playlist. You can't summon them up.
Right.
And it's not. It's incredible. It's just random, completely random luck, regardless of your methods. That's my
Yeah.
personal.
Well, maybe there's something to be said about, investigators, looking so hard for Loch Ness or something like that, and then someone coming over, a tourist or something, to Loch Ness with the idea and only the idea that there's a lake monster, and then they end up, quote unquote, seeing a lake monster.
Yeah.
But,
That's a good point. There's the other thing as well, which is to an animal. I mean, if there is an animal in there that's watching you, watching for it,
right.
And aware of its environment, intricately aware of its habitat, like Bigfoot or whatever.
Yeah.
Looks like hunting, and all animals are aware of hunting behavior.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That could be a reason for avoidance, whereas, being nonchalant and happy-go-lucky and just, whistling while your work is strolling along.
Right.
I mean, Bigfoot researchers always say, make a lot of noise.
Right.
Because you're never going to sneak up on Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Bigfoot sneaks up on you, so make a lot of noise, and if you get lucky, you get lucky, and if you don't, you don't.
Yeah, well, and even...
Usually, you don't.
Right. And people, researchers with who study gorillas and things like that, you have to be out there a long time before the gorillas will even, let themselves be seen by you. And a lot of the times it's they're letting themselves be seen because they don't, either perceive you as a threat or, whatever. And I feel like if Sasquatch does exist and it's out there and, I don't think you're going to be able to sneak up on it. It's gonna know you're there no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, game cams and all the rest of it too. Of course, I totally believe in them. We should have them.
Right.
But for a reasonably sentient animal, I always try to think of it like my house. If I came into my living room, and I wasn't aware that somebody had been into my house, and yet, something was moved on the table, one of the books was out of place, something would feel off right away.
Right.
Something's different here. What's going on?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it must be the same for animals. them, that environment is mapped.
Right.
It's mapped, so if something's at a place, you've got some sort of camo game cam up on the tree. They'll never spot that there. I'll just stick a few leaves over it. Right, you're sure? Okay,
Right.
sure they won't spot it. And I think that's just it. And we stink. Obviously, humans, we stink to animals. They can smell us miles away. So, yeah. Anyway, it sounds like I'm saying don't bother trying to find them.
No, I get it.
But generally speaking, yeah, I think animals usually find us before we find them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, man, I just had a question. I totally blanked. So I'm gonna go to my list of questions. Sorry about that.
Don't worry.
Yeah, so sort of going back to Loch Ness, which you said you had an immense interest in. What are your thoughts on the eDNA study that happened this past fall?
I think it was amazing. I was talking to Todd Dissertel about this. I think it was before that happened last year, about
Right.
his view of it, environment and DNA, how they'd actually discovered things about primates that way. And I think it's amazing. I just think, in a 25-mile body of water that's 750 feet deep, the sampling wouldn't really indicate to me that they would capture every single thing in the
Yes.
loch. That surely has to have been relatively through that area of the loch at some point. The whole thing that people are disputing 20% of the DNA unclassified, I think just that means that the samples were unreadable. Not that
Right,
it was
right.
DNA they could identify. It just wasn't a good enough sample to get a result from.
Yes.
So I don't go in for that at all. I did tweet on the day it happened that finally this golden goose had laid a normal egg.
Right.
Which really annoyed some people, which was my intention, but just for fun.
Right.
We had a big chat later. Because, it's a big, how can I describe it? Coney Island, obviously.
Yep.
Okay, and it's a bit worn down and kind of old.
Yes.
Its days past.
Right.
Loch Ness, as the venue, Loch Ness, is like a big old cryptozoological Coney Island.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and everything there is kind of run down, and there's some new bits now. But generally speaking, it's sort of cheap and cheerful, and tourists come and pay in, and they don't really reinvest much back into it.
Right.
And the sightings on the Loch Ness Register, they're not exactly critical, which is fine. It's a
Right.
genre. It's an interest. If somebody claims it and it's reasonable enough, off it goes. You even have to look at things like the live cam, where this Owen O'Fagan in Ireland has been watching
Right.
it day and night for 3 years and has had like 5 sightings this year or something already. It's like, come on.
Right.
Somebody's got to move that cam just 200 yards closer to
Right.
the loch, please. And of course, it doesn't happen because people aren't investing the money, and it's just about keeping the figures running. If you move 200 yards closer to the loch, you're going to see all of those boats a lot clearer
Yep.
that are passing by and making those blobs. So, my view is that there is something there, or that there has been. There's too many really good witnesses, really serious witnesses to deny that. And I know there are sightings in the other lochs as well, Loch Lochy, Loch Oich,
Oh, right.
Loch Garry, which connected to Loch Ness, by the way. So I've walked the Caledonian Canal and along the River Oich to the other lochs, or most of them anyway, from Loch Ness, from the Fort Augustus side, which is in the west was.
Right, yep.
It's like, they're all connected, so they essentially could have the same itinerant Nessies in all of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't buy that it's a giant eel, because eels don't have the anatomical,
Yeah.
don't have the physiology to replicate the sighting.
Right.
They can't put their necks out of the water if they have necks, and seals probably not either. Seals do occasionally get in, but everybody knows when they do.
Yeah.
Greenland shark, Jeremy Wade. I mean, that was ridiculous. So
Yes, I agree.
I think the eDNA study discovered so much, really much. They didn't discover the otters that were in there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I believe you and Scott Martis talked about that on your podcast.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the otters were okay, seals are only there now and again. They might not be present, but the otters, I mean, they're always there.
Right.
That was a bit of a puzzler. But then there was human DNA, there was sheep DNA, and they're obviously running off from the local hills. So
Yeah.
it's really hard to refute. I would just say, similar to the Operation Deep Scan, the big sonar expedition there, is that we can't really claim that there's nothing there until we've combed every corner.
Yeah, totally.
From every part. So it was worthwhile. And, the jury's still out. Essentially, scientifically speaking, it's proven from a point of experimentation. That there's nothing there. But technically and realistically on the ground, we know that there's still ground to cover.
Right.
There's hopefully.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it was a good, step in the direction of bringing, science and real, I should say, professional research, I guess, into the field of cryptozoology.
Oh, yeah. And it's fantastic. I mean, it's groundbreaking.
Right.
Groundbreaking technique. It's amazing.
Right, and now I'm sure you know that Scott is he likes the surviving plesiosaur theory, and at least Lake Champlain. I don't know if he thinks Loch Ness or Nessie is a surviving plesiosaur or not. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think he does.
Does he? I wouldn't be surprised if he did, but I didn't want to say anything definite.
I'm also one of the proponents of the plesiosaur theory.
Okay.
And, but it's just because of the descriptions. I mean,
right.
Yeah. There's this whole argument that descriptions have changed over time, but again, I go back into the mental library for that thing.
Yes.
That descriptions would become clearer with more public knowledge of these animals and what they would look like. Of course, and I also realize how descriptions can influence people's opinions too, of course.
Right.
But, yeah, I think so, because one, it can't be a seal at those proportions, even on the most conservative side.
Right,
we're talking 15 feet, 15 feet most conservative, and 40 plus at the larger end of the scale. If it was a seal, an unknown seal, if it was an eel, I mean, that would be news enough in itself. I'd settle for that. That would be
totally.
a cryptozoological discovery.
Yeah.
Giant salamanders, I can't really see it, but there's something that Scott may have discussed before, which is this, the bud-breathing turtle.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to ask Scott about that, but you can go into a little bit of that if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the Neri River turtle in Australia. Lots of turtles can do it, but this particular one has something called cloacal respiration.
Mm-hmm.
So there are birds in its orifice, in its cloacal orifice, that actually converts oxygen from the water.
Oh, wow.
So it can stay down for as long, they think, as 3 or 4 days. And it's quite a small animal. It's not a big turtle.
Right.
So the theory then is they're both reptiles, and perhaps the physiology of a plesiosaur is not too different in that respect from a turtle. They say, I don't think that's exactly true. It's a bit of a stretch, but so making that stretch, perhaps this animal has a similar technique, and that's why they're so rarely seen.
Well, yeah, and convergent evolution is totally, an option, or on the table too, I would think.
There's that too. I'm not sure what I think about convergent evolution.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, I'm not. I think it's a get out of jail free card, just like my cloacal respiration.
Right.
And I admittedly, it's a cloacal. It's a get out of jail free card. And I think we're searching for answers. Why don't we see these creatures very often if they have to breathe air? But then we also assume that plesiosaurs would have to come up every few minutes to breathe air instead of, why, if the crocodile can stay down for an hour, why can't this thing stay down for 10?
Yeah, totally.
Or 6 or 7, and then just pop its nose up in a little quiet spot. If it's got great hearing when nobody's around, it take some air and go back down.
Totally.
Yeah, so I think
Yes.
I'm not sure if I'm one of Roland's favorites, but he's definitely one of mine. And he's a really lovely guy and so well researched. So anyway, he talks about a skeptical theory, which is the my theory sucks the least theory. Right?
Okay.
So you could say, sure, we've never seen a 40-foot plus eel that can raise its neck out of the water, almost mimicking a plesiosaur-like animal anywhere in history or in the fossil record, but it beats the theory that some prehistoric survivors living on to the modern day, in an extremely cold body of water in the Scottish Highlands. That's the my theory sucks the least theory.
Okay.
Yeah, so you just basically you make up something else that's also completely implausible.
Right.
But it sits better in the mind of somebody than this other thing, which is a real stretch to belief based upon the current paradigm we have about when the dinosaurs and their relations to the aquatic lizards died out, or if they died out quickly or slowly, and that's all theory.
Well, and here's the oh, sorry.
No, that's it. Really, I am definitely a proponent.
Well, yeah. Well, what I was gonna say was people trying to refute or come up with a different sort of theory as opposed to the plesiosaur theory are always like, okay, so it's like maybe a long-necked seal, or maybe the eel can stick its head out of the water like a plesiosaur, and pretty much everything is just a silhouette or mimic of a plesiosaur. So that's what I think makes the plesiosaur theory that much more sort of not off the table for me, at least.
No, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's, to me, I'm laboring the point slightly, but in regards to what you're saying, it's JFK, it's the magic bullet theory. Right. I mean, the non-plesiosaur theory is the magic bullet theory, like a long-necked seal, giant salamander, even somebody mentioned a giant mud skipper with a lure on its head that was almost like a plesiosaur neck and head. And I'm just like, wow.
Yeah.
The portal jumping plesiosaur. Oh, ghosts of dinosaurs. I heard one.
Yep, plesiosaur ghost. Person. That's a fun one.
Very reputable person who I really respected. I was like, really? That's what you've got? And I think Carl Sagan said that too, actually.
Really?
That perhaps this was the ghost of dinosaurs. No, it wasn't ghost of dinosaurs. It was inherited memory, evolutionary memory from the time of the dinosaurs, when we would have been dinosaurs like 65 million years ago, and then that memory stayed with us, and then that's why we see it swimming in about lake. It's beyond stretch. I mean,
I was gonna say, if that's the case, why aren't we seeing like land dinosaurs and things like that? I guess more often, but
more often. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's a strange world.
Yeah. So you said you've been to Lake Champlain.
Yes.
Yeah, what was that like?
It was, I mean, you have to see the comparison. And I know that Lake Champlain is in no way anywhere close to your largest lake in any respect whatsoever. But, it was 107, 114 miles, 14 miles across at the widest point. And Loch Ness is our biggest, and it's 25 miles long and about a mile and a half wide. And it's, it's very deep, but that's about it. It was an awesome body of water and really, really beautiful. I think I saw snapping turtles there. I definitely saw some big turtles.
Oh, wow.
Bald eagles and a few different sorts of snakes and bits and pieces. No champs.
Right.
Yeah, but it was wonderful. It was certainly plausible that something could hide out there, but I wonder if that's a British point of view when you're looking at. We always think that well, sure, in the Pacific Northwest for Bigfoot, or well, sure, in Lake Champlain compared to Loch Ness,
right.
But from a scientific point of view, it's still where's the breeding population? Right?
Yes, right.
Yeah, where's the breeding? Now, with Champlain, am I right in assuming that the Richelieu River leads out of there, right? I think the Richelieu River.
I think I'm not totally up to date on the geography of it, but that would be a question for Scott.
Hey, Scott, and I eventually, I was trying to establish, so I'm always maritime,
Right.
maritime visitors from the sea. I still think Nessie is a part-time resident in the loch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. So we mentioned, because we've been trying to do an interview for a while, and things just happen to, life happens.
Yeah, that's true.
And we were going to talk about, sort of the, we mentioned in the beginning the sort of, negative parts of cryptozoology, and I was wondering if you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Sure, we can talk about that. Well, I think now one of the most important things when talking about the things that you've experienced in the bad, or
Right.
you think have been done to you, or you've been unhappy about,
Mm-hmm.
is accepting your part in
Okay.
the conflict or the disagreement. And so, accepting my part, I would say that I don't meet people's expectations sometimes. And what I mean by that is that I have it in the workplace a lot, often having to, if I have to discipline or fire somebody, is that I sound very gentle and sort of polite. And generally speaking, whether you're a good or bad person, it gives you a series of expectations. And when they're not met, for instance, if I have to turn around and tell somebody they're not behaving very
Right.
very well, very much like a human,
Right.
occasionally, then that's going to offend you. One, because you've been told something that's negative about yourself, and two, you've had a bit of kickback when you didn't expect it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the bully in the schoolyard that gets a bloody nose from the wimpy he's getting lunch money from.
Right.
And he says, I'm going to see the teacher, I want to make a complaint. I
Yeah.
was expecting some lunch money today, and yet I've got this bloody nose. I want to see the manager, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, so my part in this is I can be quite confrontational, and unlike many other British people, I often just name the elephant in the room and say, no, actually, I think it's that. This is what's going on.
Okay.
I don't like it. But doesn't mean I'm always right, and sometimes maybe it's a bit shirty as well. So
Okay.
that's okay. So on the other side of things, what I discovered in cryptozoology is that there are camps, there are
Yes.
tribes,
Right.
there's cliques, and some of the cliques and the tribes are very powerful and influential, and some of them are just very energetic, in their attack of you if they
Right.
don't like you. And,
Not unlike, going to school or anything like that.
It's kind of really like school,
Right.
actually. Yeah, it's really like school, and having that being so long ago for me, I don't think I realized that at the beginning. Oh, wait a minute, this is like school.
Mm-hmm.
And over this 3 or 4 year period, I've noticed how many times I've been, used as a battering ram against others,
Oh, yeah.
or as a shield, and how many times, I've been on the receiving end of something that seems quite unnecessary at points. Now, unnecessary because of the type of conflict, and I won't go into anything too deep, but there were
Okay. Yeah.
a particular conflict I had why I'm very unhappy about a colleague in the UK, their behaviour
Mm-hmm.
towards a fellow colleague, and they'd sent me some of the books, and I just said, look, I don't really want to talk about this person this way, and it went on and on. Eventually he said, look, I don't think we should be in contact, I'm just going to send your books back, if that's okay. And I did, and this person spent the next 3 years, downplaying reviews on Amazon, calling conferences I was speaking at to make sure that they wouldn't put me on, or radio shows,
Right.
contacting people under fake profiles, and I thought I was dreaming. But this can't be real, because
Right.
like normal people don't do this. And that's just one example out of many, and it was just so weird, and I still deal with it, actually, not so frequently anymore, but from
Right.
3, 4, 5 different people, and I almost feel like a child when I speak about it, like, oh, come on.
Yeah. Exactly.
Definitely had a part in this, Andy, but was the part really, did it really warrant this kind
Right.
of long response? And how long are we going to do it? Can't we all just get along? Remember that old thing?
Yes.
Can't we all just get along? Yeah, and that's that's just where I am. It's a shame because I think people look at us from the outside, moving away from me now, at the genre, and say, well, look at them. It's the same in UFOs and paranormal too, apparently.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Tearing each other to pieces.
No, it definitely
Why
is.
should we take it seriously?
Yeah, so sort of what's like your takeaway when something like that happens and stuff?
You've got to basically be in it because you love it for yourself.
Right.
When somebody is talking about somebody else behind their back to you, when somebody else is the meal of the day, and the talk is going around, go easy on them because everybody gets their turn, and one day it will be yours.
Right.
Yeah. So be nice when it's somebody else's turn because it's going to be yours at some point in the near future.
Right.
That's it. Do it. Don't do others because it's coming around. That's my advice.
Right. Well, and so much. I guess my next question, going off of that, is sort of not, I guess, specifically about drama or people fighting in cryptozoology or any field of anomalous research, but how would you sort of improve those fields of research?
I would just try to get some sort of, I almost say community, that obviously not community, some
Right.
sort of line of understanding going. I think if you're happy with what you're doing, you're happy in yourself, you've done the very best you can to examine objectively the information that you're looking at, then you're not really going to feel so slighted by the disagreements that come out. And you're also a lot less likely to go and try to diminish somebody else publicly.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'm not perfect in this regard, and I know I've had my issues. I really do hope that the whole thing has actually taught me to be a little less reactive in my responses to people. I think because I was always such a laid-back, gentle person growing up, and facing those bullies. That these days, when I get it, and it seems like I'm being stepped on, like I want to jump in and smack them quickly before, so they know not to do it again. And obviously,
right.
We're all adults. That's not a good way to behave.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think people just need to say, look, we're all in this for the same reason, although we might not have the same motive. But that is, the paranormalists want to prove that, and the interdimensional portal hopping people, they want to prove that, and the flesh and blood people want to prove this aspect of it. But we can all share information. So I had a situation when I was interviewing some creationists. Now, I'm a religious person, so yeah, I mean, religiously speaking, I'm a creationist, I guess. But
okay.
I don't look at my cryptozoology through the lens of creationism.
Right.
I'm just a cryptozoologist who's also religious, so I'm a creationist. You see?
Okay.
So it's kind of, so it's almost like saying, like as if I was a lawyer. Oh, I'm also a lawyer as well as a cryptozoologist. Right? That's just something else that I am.
Yeah.
I don't look at it through that lens. I'm just looking to see what's there and what we can examine. So I just think we've all got very similar motivations, and we don't really have to really focus on what the person's baseline philosophies are to share that information. Let them do what they want with it, and you do what you want. The point is, you learned more because a colleague shared something with you, instead of saying, I'm not sharing this with Nate because his page just got 500 new likes, and that's competition to me.
Right.
That takes away from my GoFundMe campaign or whatever people are doing.
Right.
So yeah, just come together a bit more. Don't take it so seriously, actually.
Okay.
Just enjoy it. And share a bit.
All right. Well.
Lots of ramble.
No, that was great. Because my last question was essentially if there was like a piece of advice or anything, what would you give? But I think it kind of nailed that on the head. So.
I do have a piece of advice.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. If you can't make waves. No. That's not it. That's not again. You're gonna edit this anyway, aren't you?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
My piece of advice is all garbled, but it's late here, so I've got. Okay. If you can't swim, then don't make waves.
Ah, okay.
That's my only advice on life.
Okay, yeah. No, that's
Never take
great.
it.
All right.
I never take it.
All right. Well, plugs. Is there any projects or anything that are coming up that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah. So, Beast of North America. I keep promising it. I am writing it, and I have been just this whole COVID thing, just working crazy hours.
Yes. Yep.
In healthcare, so I'm in healthcare, so I've been doing that for like non-stop the last 2 months. But I'm about a month away from done, I think.
Oh wow.
So yeah, it's really close. That should be coming out soon. Me and Chris, we should be popping up to some other sort of cryptid locales in the UK this year, and I am signed up to the Corridor 13 agency with Russell Accord.
Oh wow.
And Bob Gilman and all those guys. So if there are conferences coming up, and they let me travel from the UK to the US.
Yeah.
Then I should be attending some later in the year. Obviously, that's all up in the air. But if it opens up, if we're allowed to travel there, then I will be coming by to see you all.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I'd love to get together and talk with you again in person.
It'd be awesome. I'd love it. We could be at the museum or something.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, where can people follow you?
Best place, actually, facebook.com/beasts of. Also under Instagram and Tumblr, Beasts of Britain. YouTube, Beasts of Britain, the same thing. I do a little sort of low-key kind of podcast. It's more just like a chatty chinwag called Beastly Theories.
Yep.
On Podbean, YouTube, and you can catch a few interviews there as well.
Yeah, I've seen them. I love them.
Yeah, nothing professional like this. I think I actually just press record halfway through a sentence and we just talk.
No problem. No, I try to keep this casual, so
Yes.
so
yeah,
people
lovely.
aren't so anxious or nervous or anything like that.
Yeah.
But all right, well, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nate.
All right. So do you have any closing words or anything?
Yeah, enjoy it. Keep the hunt up. So it's for you. It's not for anybody else.
Right.
Don't post things for likes and kudos. Post it because you think it's something. And always go back and get a comparison shot, no matter what you do.
Right.
A comparison shot is mandatory.
All
And
right.
just be nice to each other in peace. And this day and age, of course,
Absolutely.
just be good to your fellow man.
All right. Well said. Thank you so much, Andy, for coming on.
Thank you.
I'm glad we could finally get together and sort of not have something random happen where we can't.
No, it's great. I mean, you were kidnapped that last time, and I was
Right.
in the army, so yeah, it was delayed.
Right. Well, yeah. Hopefully we can get together in person and talk and
Yes,
have a day or something.
reminisce.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a great night, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you, Nate.